Have you or anybody you know been affected by 90s cartoons? Had they ruined your view of reality and things that you can see and watch now? Well, we here at Oddcast would like to talk to you.
Hey guys, welcome to Oddcast, a Four Nerds by Nerds show. My name is Sienna, here with my co-hosts Joe and Paige. Today we're actually going to be talking about how 90s cartoons mess you up with today's movies.
Content in general, honestly.
So we talk on this channel a lot about nostalgia and about how nostalgia can be wielded properly, improperly, how it gets used and played against us all the times. And I thought about it, and it dawned on me that we are spoiled.
Yeah.
And we are spoiled because 90s cartoons were so good.
They really were.
So good. And I don't mean like the 90s cartoons like Rugrats and stuff. Yes, those were good, but that's not what I'm talking about. What I am talking about in particular are the comic book story shows that we all watched as kids. Namely, for example, Batman, the animated series.
WB, Warner Brothers.
Justice League, the animated series.
Warner Brothers.
Superman.
X-Men. Spider-Man.
Yeah, Fox's Spider-Man.
And the Fantastic Four, Ghost Rider. There were a lot of cartoons. A lot of them.
Even G.I. Joe.
Yeah. But
He-Man.
Yeah. We can keep going.
How,
we can totally keep going.
Could just
But the question becomes, but how did they ruin what's happening now? Well, here are some examples. So Spider-Man, the animated series, introduced all of us to what we know as Venom. The Venom that we know came from that show. So when you made Topher Grace Venom in Spider-Man 3, all of us who watched the cartoon show immediately went, what?
Why?
Have you seen how big Venom is in the cartoon?
Or we all watched X-Men, the animated television show, and then we sat down to watch the movie, and we were all like, what? What is it? What?
Every time. For all of them.
We definitely use what we've learned as kids watching those cartoons, and we bring them into today of like, this is what's supposed to be, and when we don't get it, we're like,
well, but
what?
that's with everything. With everything we consume, our first time we see something shapes how we view it going forward. Because that's our first experience, and most of us, at least I know with us in our 30s, we grew up with that. That was how we learned, unless you also read the comics, but then both of them, because obviously if you read the comics, you were going to watch the cartoon shows. They both shaped how we view the DCEU, the MCU, a lot of the new content that they're trying to bring forward, because we are the nostalgia generation because of all of the things we consumed in the 90s. And they've all kind of fallen short. Well, with the exception of the MCU, but the MCU is special. The MCU is special.
So I don't even think that they've all fallen short. There are a couple of really good shining examples of they did it different and it worked really well. Heath Ledger's Joker is fantastic.
That's accurate.
I don't think anybody's going to be like, that was a shit Joker. I mean, it's not Mark Hamill, but it's different, but it works.
It's not Mark Hamill, nor is it Jack Nicholson's, because even people were comparing that to Jack Nicholson's Joker as well.
So it's a weird dynamic of things. Even Venom has changed since the 90s. He went from being the villainous bully of Peter Parker into being an anti-hero. I'm totally on board with it. That's fine. The way that he looks in the movies now is more reminiscent of the way that he looked in the 90s cartoon, which I was already familiar with as like a baseline. So there's this weird feeling of piecing things together to be like, oh, okay, I get it. I understand. But you can change things and that's fine. But you can also change things and it's not fine. Looking at you, Carnage. Looking at you, Morbius. The Vulture isn't the youth-stealing character that he was in the cartoon show, but you know what? He works just fine as he is now.
Yeah.
You also go into most of the X-Men movies, the live-action ones, most of them were trash.
Yeah.
And you know what was cool about the 90s cartoon was the 90s cartoon stayed faithful-esque to the comics.
Well, it stayed faithful to the comics at the time.
Yes, at that time.
90s comics were different than they are now, like and the 80s before
the characters do change, and,
Yeah.
and I get that, but they at that time, if you didn't read the comics, but you watched Fox's Spider-Man, you were caught up to date. Like, that's just kind of how it was. And when you go now and try to watch Venom or Venom 2 or even Morbius, or it's just even the current Batman movies, it's just
you're stuck with, you can change the formula and it works, but there's a picturesque version of it that we all have. And essentially 90s cartoons messed us up because we compare things to that initial take of it. Like Green Goblin works. In the animated series for Spider-Man, we had Kingpin.
Yeah.
So we knew him as a Spider-Man villain. So then he shows up and he's a Daredevil villain, and you're like, okay.
It works.
It works. But it's just one of those things where there's a difference there. There's a pull apart where we can understand it and you can translate it into a way that it works. But at the same time, when something goes horribly wrong, it goes off the rails really quickly. The best example of that is Season 2 of X-Men has the Dark Phoenix saga, the best telling of it to exist.
Yep.
Yeah.
In the 90s as an animated feature. And they tried it twice.
They did try it
Twice. And they messed it up both times. It's like they looked at the first time and they said, you know what? I could do it worse. Let's make it happen. They changed the timeline. They moved things around. And you know what? It still sucked.
Yeah.
What is that?
God,
How did a cartoon with 5 episodes outshine a high-budget production from Fox? Twice! It was the conclusion of 2 different trilogies of films to build it up. What is that?
Now we're not saying that the current movies I understand that you kind of have to have your own take, sure, whatever. But unfortunately, if you were born in the era that we were born in, or if you weren't even born in that era, but you are obsessed with it, or you really like the stuff from that timeline, you're gonna realize that half the stuff that was out back then, it's.
Well, I think it comes down to the difference of storytelling. Because storytelling in the 90s is different than it is right now. They weren't. I know the times were different. I'm not negating how that has influenced it, but they weren't afraid to tell a legitimate story and go into how it affected the characters and how it worked into the world. They went for it and it worked. It was almost real.
Destroy all mutants with the friends of humanity. Who needs enemies?
No, don't, please! We don't want mutant lovers in our town, so we're moving you out.
And I would argue that the 90s are actually the first time that happened.
Yeah,
there are a couple of examples in the 80s, sure, Transformers had a story that it built on, and G.I. Joe and all those, but it wasn't quite the same. Those were all very episodic of standalone. You can watch one episode and not have to have watched the previous ones.
Yeah, that's true.
But with X-Men, it built on itself. It just constantly told a story. And Batman, while it was episodic, still built on itself.
Mm-hmm.
Same as Spider-Man did.
I still don't agree as far as X-Men that the whole first season was about Jubilee, but that's just sounds like.
Well, she was the gateway character. She was the way to introduce you to the world. They removed Jubilee, obviously, from the movies and replaced her with Rogue. Rogue became the character that you followed to bring you into it, because the idea is that
even though
I've never seen
Jubilee.
it before, and then you follow them into it so that you get introduced to it. So that way they don't have to. It's a creative way to do world building.
Yes, it's a creative way to inform your audience what's going on and not make it seem so stunted, especially in a visual medium. In books, you can give more backstory and more everything, but in a visual medium, you have to be able to talk through somebody to someone else, and that's what they use those characters for, and that's perfectly fine. But they still, even though they use that, the movies just...
I fell into that. I did. I fell into that as far as, I'm older than these two, so I definitely fell into the whole fact that my expectations are going to be based off of watching those cartoons, and it's not. Even with Batman, the original cartoons, Batman was a legit detective. Aside from this current The Batman with Patterson, all the other Batmans were not Pattinson, excuse me. all the other Batmans weren't really detectives.
They
Not even.
Well, and that's part of the problem is like
Batman.
In our Batman review, I discussed that Bruce Wayne hasn't been seen since George Clooney.
Yeah.
And I'm not even saying that movie's good. I'm just saying, he was there. But Bruce Wayne in the cartoon is awesome.
Yeah.
He's this full of, he's got philanthropy on his side. He's rich. He plays a part in all the stories of Batman. And they spend half the time in each episode with Bruce doing Bruce things.
Yeah.
Not just
Very true.
Batman.
Very
like,
true.
part of his crime solving is that he uses his power and influence to accomplish things.
Mm-hmm. To move the pieces to gather information, because then he does all this politicking too. I mean, it was like that in Superman also. Like
Luthor is a much more substantial character in the animated series cartoon because A, you're not trying to rush him to pigeonhole him into something, and B, you can see him moving all the power pieces around, and you're like, oh man, this guy's influenced in everything.
You see, Superman, I own Metropolis. My technology built it, my will keeps it going, and nearly 2/3 of its people work for me whether they know it or not. Even you have to admit it's a model of efficiency.
I call him the Black Luthor though, because he was basically black. I mean,
he did look the part.
He looked black.
He definitely had a tan.
He was voiced by a black actor, I think, if I'm not mistaken, voice actor, yeah, Luthor was black.
he was one of my favorite iterations of Lex Luthor, though.
Yes, he was.
And it was just, I haven't liked any of the Superman movies since the Christopher Reeves, the second one, the third one. We won't talk about the third one. But even while I love Smallville, that was really more about Clark Kent and not Superman.
I like that Luthor though.
No. I liked Michael Rosenbaum as Luthor too, even though I saw Michael Rosenbaum at Dragon Con, and he was kind of a dick. It made me sad. But they haven't done justice to the characters since the 90s cartoons, in my opinion. And it's really sad. I don't understand how you can do it so easily in a cartoon, but you can't capture the characters in a feasible way on film. I don't understand that disconnect.
They need to go back and take notes, in my opinion. Seriously.
And part of what the MCU has done is taken those notes.
Yeah.
It's true. MCU was a special case.
Yeah, Kevin Feige pushed to give Wolverine that stupid haircut for Hugh Jackman.
Yeah.
He even snuck comic books onto the set because they were banned.
Really? I didn't know that. That's interesting.
On the set of X-Men, the actors weren't allowed to have comics. They weren't allowed to read them, to have any influence from them.
What the fuck?
But Kevin Feige was sneaking them on there to be like, this is the way your character is.
That is bizarre to me. Okay.
But did you guys that were born in the 90s or even grew up watching the 90s cartoons, do you agree with what we're saying? I mean, because it's a conversation we've had plenty of times, and it's something that we frequently talk about. I want to know what you guys think. I want to know if you guys agree. If you don't agree, I really want to know why, because
even down to and there are so many examples. Transformers tells a really good story, but the movies don't tell a good story.
Even the Ninja Turtles, even the original Teenage Ninja Turtles,
the Ninja Turtles
were great, and now they're just.
And that's the 80s.
Yeah, that's the 80s.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even say that they're great, because I'm gonna go against the grain of CN here, and I'm actually gonna say that the early 2000s Ninja Turtles is probably my favorite incarnation of the Ninja Turtles.
Really? Are you talking about the live action?
No, the Nickelodeon cartoon.
Oh, the cartoon.
Yeah.
Okay, I know you're talking about.
It's really good. It was way better than the 80s one, and their crossover was.
Although the
Chef's
crossover
kiss.
was great when they brought in the comic book Ninja Turtles, the 80s Ninja Turtles. Yeah, that was good.
Most crossovers though are really awesome, because I mean it's also the nostalgia too.
I think that'd be a topic we should talk about as far as crossovers. Yeah. I think that'd be a good topic.
And then of course there are shining examples, and then Teen Titans is another more current example of something. But I think the biggest example of a cartoon show being completely messed up by somebody putting it into a movie.
Yes.
Is Avatar, The Last Airbender.
There is no movie in Ba Sing Se! God, that was absolute dumpster fire garbage. Oh, I hated it.
We've talked about this.
Well, now that we've triggered Paige.
Yes, you
All
have.
right, guys. Let us know in the comments. What's your favorite take on like an animated series from the past that
There
they
is
did
no
a good
movie
job
impossible
on,
to say.
and
There is
something
no
that they
movie
brought from the
impossible
past
to say.
that they did not live up to par? Jean Grey.
Yeah, we're looking at you.
There is no movie impossible.
At least Juggernaut got his comeuppance and like was actually made correctly for.
Yeah,
Deadpool
at least he
2.
got his redemption.
Yeah, like how do you mess up that character?
Don't you know who I am? I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!
So badly. Like he's such an easy character. Thank God the MCU has magic, and now hopefully it'll have mutants soon, because I love the Juggernaut.
Shut up, bitch, you know who it is. It's the Juggernaut, bitch! Oh, yeah!
Well, you can see in the trailer of Doctor Strange that pretty sure that's Patrick Stewart.
We should tell him the truth.
So pretty sure that we're about to see the Multiverse of Madness. I feel like is a gateway to a lot of the new stuff, depending on how it ends
We're
with the
gonna see.
multiverse. So we're gonna see.
There are
It's
rumors.
soon.
There are rumors that Scarlet Witch is going to fight Phoenix.
Yo,
That'd be
alright.
crazy. That's for another
I
episode.
cannot
Yeah,
wait for
that's
this
That's for
movie.
another
I
episode.
Don't worry,
cannot
guys.
wait for this movie.
There's a review coming
Oh, for sure.
eventually. All right,
Yeah.
guys, take it easy.
Later, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.